I'm last, which means I am standing between you and drinks. More importantly, you are standing between me and drinks. After our very full day, I don't know about you, I'm emotionally exhausted. Frankly, I'm sick of talking about storytelling. It's not that complicated. You go out and you look at things and you listen to things, and then you convey that information in an accurate and entertaining way. You send it out into the world. You go to the bar with your friends and tell each other how great you are, and then the next day you do it again. So we're good? Let's go. When I first came to this conference, it's funny to be standing here again. I don't actually get invited anymore, I just show up. When I first came to this conference, and this is because I'm a terrible North American, I was expecting sort of 10 people in a room who didn't speak English, and we could just kind of look and smile at each other. And I remember Jackie talking, and I was sitting in this room full of people, and Jackie was talking, and I had this moment where I went, oh no, I am woefully underprepared. Yet again, I am woefully underprepared. I don't like speaking very much. You'll notice that I'm constantly gripping the podium. I don't know why I do this, except there's something about this conference that I just love. And when the first time I came here, and I was standing up here totally nervous, the advice you're always given is to imagine everybody naked. But then I got to know some of you, and it got kind of weird. I was feeling like I shouldn't do that anymore. And what I did that first speech is I sort of bounced around the room looking for happy faces, and I would kind of lock into the smiling face. And that first year, it was Andrea, who just gave me a very kind introduction. And what's funny about that moment is I was so grateful to her, because occasionally I would go off to another face, and it would be an angry Romanian man. And I would kind of go back to Andrea, and I needed her as like this anchor. And afterwards, I was like, I want to go say thank you to Andrea. I didn't know she was Andrea. She was this smiling woman in the audience. And when you get to be a man of a certain age, you look like me, say, if you go up to like a beautiful young woman in a hotel lobby, you're immediately like a creep. So I had this fear that other people would look at me and go, oh, that's the pervert from Canada trying to pick up nice Andrea. What I didn't know is I was standing here going, I should say thank you, but I can't. Andrea was, as she told me later, was, I believe, in the bathroom, inhaling from a plastic paper bag, trying to get up the courage to come talk to me. And it might have been that we both didn't say anything to each other, and I always think about like what we would have lost. I don't remember now who went up to who. I went up to you. Apparently my fear of being a pervert, I conquered it. But I do think about like what a tragedy it would have been if we didn't say anything to each other, if our fear had sort of overwhelmed the moment. And so when I think about what I love about this conference, it's not just the hospitality we receive or how, frankly, ego stroking this week is for me. It's honestly, it gets me through the whole year of the shit I take. It's not just that we're in this room with a bunch of like-minded hearts that we all sort of agree on certain things that make us feel probably less alone. But it's that this is the place where you can ask the questions you want to ask. And you can say the things that you want to say. And that's like such an important thing for writers, for creative people, for journalists. And I think that's what I love about this place. It's interesting to me because from the outside, I'm supposed to talk about the writer's life. And this is a passionate subject for me because from the outside, people who aren't writers or people who want to be writers, I think have a misconception of the writer's life. I think they imagine generally people wearing berets or some kind of hat, smoking some kind of French cigarette probably, maybe at the end of a stick, sitting in a bar or a bakery somewhere, ruminating, publishing some beautiful book that receives wide acclaim, partying in Paris or Lisbon or wherever. And man, it is not like that, except for this few days. This is the only time my writer's life lives up to the writer's life. The rest of the time, it's actually kind of hard. The one thing I do like is that all my neighbors think I'm a drug dealer because I have kind of a nice house and I don't seem to work. I'm often kind of outside picking up the newspaper in my underwear and then sort of crawling around my house at night, and I'm sure they think I'm some kind of vampire. But the thing I know about the writer's life, and I think this is almost always true, and I think it's true as a facet of every creative life, not just the writer's life, but every creator's creative life, especially a young creative life. The thing that you're constantly living with is fear. It is always there. This business, in some ways, the exercise of writing is almost designed to make you petrified. Let's start with the uncertainty of the life. I'm sure all of you have a parent who is worried sick because you have decided you want to be creative. They want you to be a doctor or a pilot or a lawyer, or if you want to be creative, maybe something like an architect. They do not want you to be a writer or an actor or a painter. All of those lives have doubt built into them. You have no guarantees of anything. And that is a very scary existence in a lot of ways. I look at my friends who live much more conventional, I guess would be the word, or wholesome lives. They have pensions. They're going to have pensions. Like money is just going to keep falling from the sky for the rest of their lives. They have very stable marriages. Their children know their names, which is nice. And I don't have any of that. There's also, the scariness of the reporting. Knocking on the door of a family who lost a child. Going to a war zone. Asking a question that's a bit hard. Knocking or making phone calls to people who don't want to talk to you. All of that is sort of a constant anxiety. There's the anxiety of even finding a story in the first place. Running out of ideas. Will I ever find another good story? If you are a loyal reader of me, you will notice I have done shit all for about 11 months, and it's causing me great stress. It has not been a good writing year for me. There is the writing itself as well. I remember as a young person sitting down and always being petrified that I was writing something that would be terrible, that people would make fun of, that people wouldn't read in the first place. What's worse, not being read or being read by people who then tell you you suck? Not making money for my writing. You're putting something out into the universe that's important to you, that you've put a lot of time and a lot of work into, and then you're kind of sending it out and hoping people don't shit all over it. And you have no control. This is something for a control freak like me, the thing I've never gotten used to is that idea that I can write, I have control over those sentences. And then it's kind of gone a little bit. And it's a very strange sensation to say, here's this thing I care deeply about, go out into the world like a child, and then they either do nothing or people say nice things, and you can't do anything about it. It's a constant source of anxiety for me. And then, of course, built into that is the criticism that is pretty much a permanent part of your existence, from editors or from people who think you shouldn't be a writer or creative. people who don't like what you're doing. There's all sorts of new and wonderful ways for people to tell you you suck. Twitter is a fantastic way to shrink your ego down to a very small size. Facebook, boy, those comments, they do wonders for me and my various neuroses. We live in an amazing world where so many miracles. I can fly here very quickly, and I can also be completely destroyed in a 10-minute span. It's fantastic. No, it's actually really hard. Fear is this undercurrent that kind of runs through everything you do as a creative person. It's like electricity. One of the things I like to do when I have to go last is I rely on the wisdom of the people who talked before me, and I like to steal little things from them. Because it's very important, I think, as a writer to acknowledge, or to at least get really good at being a thief, a good thief, a subtle thief. We call it honoring people. I'm paying tribute, an homage, if you will. But I was struck today by how many people talked about fear. Jackie talked about listening through her closet wall, just trying to decide whether her dad was a mean drunk that night. Or the time in her tent in Africa when she was covering famine and she wasn't sure if she was up to the task. I was scared to death. That's a quote from Jackie this morning. Kelly. Now, I'm not emotionally prepared, really, to talk about Kelly's presentation. I'm really sorry I don't have pictures of babies, because that really made it. Boy, that was a very strong way to start my day. Luckily, Kelly is very good at just taking you to the edge of complete despair and then showing a picture of a baby in a dog coat, and then you kind of go back up. It's amazing. Quotes from Kelly this morning. I was terrified of my daughter and all the things I was screwing up. There were too many stress hormones, too much fear. She had a doctor called the Terror Doc. About her story, she said, I'm so scared of being a cliche. I was really scared of writing about Tracy. Jonah talked about the anchorlessness of a world without myths. He introduced us to Sad Edna. Where's Jonah? Sad Edna? Was it Sad Edna? Sad Edna. I like to be accurate in my reporting. That was just, you just witnessed fact-checking. Sad Edna and her halitosis, inadequacy marketing, this constant barrage of things that are made to make you feel bad. Amy gave us a delightful talk where I learned that I've been tweeting all wrong for the past 4 years of my life. She informed me that no one was going to read anything I ever write. The quote I wrote down was, homepage visits are declining. That sentence leaves no wiggle room. There's no out from that. That is just bad. Yet more fear. Wendy, it's hard to wander from the path of intro to Nutgraph because then you're in the wilderness. She's talking about that process of writing and letting go of the conventions of writing. She talked about the much more scary unknown. What the hell is a story? She talked about at the very end of her piece that idea that you're about to start a new project and how it's the most wonderful feeling in the world, but also terrifying. And Lisa, you don't have a story until you find a story, and that sentence for me is, wow, that's really hard to take in. One of the John Smiths, I have 18 productive years left, or do I? Things have to go perfect, and we know in this world they don't. Fantastic. Thank you, John Smith. So it's this constant theme of life, is this fear. And luckily, because our lovely and talented speakers today are kind and considerate people, perhaps unconsciously or subconsciously, they also gave us the antidotes to fear. They gave us the countermeasures, which was nice, I thought. Jackie, don't be afraid to ask the question that you think will be uncomfortable to the other person. You learn to keep your shaking on the inside. Don't be afraid to probe. Believe this work matters. These are countermeasures. Kelly, Tom would go into reporter face. That was his defense mechanism against fear. She might not know this was sort of a very comforting thing for me, but Tom saying to her, you talked to her and read to her and sang to her. These are defenses against fear. I made the decision to put everything in. Conquering fear right there. Jonah, explanation, meaning, story, and ritual. The hero's journey, that made me feel really good. I like that part. I know why those movies are successful, because just hearing you talk about those movies, I was like, yes, this is better now. I feel better. I'm happy. So much more is possible for ordinary people was one of the quotes. The Dove campaign, remember you are more beautiful than you think. That is a nice thought. I can see why that commercial was successful. It got 150 million views in a month. I don't like to admit this, a couple of million of those views. Amy, if we remember, homepage visits are declining, mobile page views are climbing. Meet your audience where they live. This is a very nice kind of thought. This is like a fear-conquering thought. Asking what makes you smile or think. That's a nicer thought than what are you afraid of? What makes you smile or think? Wendy, when in doubt, default honesty. I like that. That's one of my favorites of the day. And if anyone has any good ideas, meet me after. I think that's a great way to conquer fear as well. And Lisa, the story of civilization is the story of what happened on the banks. And again, one of my favorites, because it has absolutely no scientific basis, I don't think, but I think it might be right. 1 in 10 anything, you're going to find something good. Here's how I think you fight fear. I write about space a lot, and I used this yesterday at the bank. I gave a talk at the bank, so sorry for those of you who were there yesterday. I'm going to repeat a quote. And by the way, bankers, a very honest and direct group of people. Afterwards, one of them came up to me who had seen me last year, and he said, "Oh, you have grown a beard." And I said, "Yes, I've grown a beard." And he said, "And you have also gotten fatter." Thank you, my Romanian friend. But it's a quote from Buzz Aldrin, an American astronaut who is the second man to walk on the moon. And if you can imagine, at least he had the advantage of seeing Neil Armstrong step off the ladder and not completely disappear into like some pile of muck or be attacked by aliens. But can you imagine just for a moment, getting into a little can? If you look at that capsule, it's held together by screws, like ordinary hardware store screws. And they went to the moon. And then they stood on the moon. And then they got back from the moon. I mean, it is like, I understand why people think that is fake. Because I'm like, I don't know how anyone has the sack to even think about doing that. Someone asked Buzz Aldrin, how do you get to be brave? And his answer is one of my favorite, and I hope this translates well, but in English this is a lovely combination of syllables. It's the gradual accumulation of discipline. You kind of go step by step. You don't go, I'm going to the moon. You take step by step. First you go in the pool, then you go in the centrifuge, then you go, and you build up this resistance to fear. For creative types, very few of us will be astronauts, I suspect. For creative types, those pools and test capsules and all that kind of stuff, for me, it's the chair. I like to think we are astronauts of the chair. Often people ask me, how do you be a writer? And it's not that complicated again. You sit in the fucking chair and you type words onto a thing, and that is writing. I wrote a story recently. I had a kid email me, and he said, I saw the same thing in August, and I was thinking about writing about it. And I was like, I'm really glad you just thought about it and didn't actually do it, because then you didn't write, you thought about writing, and that's not really useful. For some people, the chair is like this source of terror on its own, that they look at it as this painful place they've got to go to get this job done. Some of them come up with a term, writer's block, which is really a nice way of, it's just a different word for whining, I think, basically. I don't believe in writer's block. Again, because if you sit down in the chair and you put your hands on some kind of writing device, magical things happen. You sit down and you do the work. And you do it again and again and again until you've given yourself enough evidence that you can do it. This is what Buzz Aldrin is talking about. He didn't believe right away that he could get to the moon, but he went through all these steps that made him believe he would get to the moon. What you get then, if you do the work, if you sit down and you write and you correct and you accept criticism and you edit and you get better, what you get then is not bluster. It's not arrogance. It's not unjustified ego. There are people in the world who will put that out into the world. But you can't lie to yourself. If that's what you're doing, if your ego is unjustified, if you haven't done the work, you're still scared. In fact, you're probably more scared than you've ever been, because now you're acting like someone that inside you know you aren't. What you are, if you do that work, is confident. And confidence is something that runs through great stories. If you ask any editor what they want to see in a story, one of the words they will come up with is confidence. You know what you're talking about. For writers, confidence is earned, I think, more than anywhere else, alone in the chair. What we feel at this conference, that hope and optimism, that great feeling of possibility, I always worry that when we leave here, that fades quickly, that reality sort of confronts us, and we forget that feeling that we had listening to the speakers here. I believe that if you want to get that feeling again, you just sit in your chair. There's no process, there's no correct process to being a writer. I think that's another question a lot of us get. What's your process? For me, it is I write at nighttime, in the dark. I turn out all the lights. I put on my headphones. I listen to music that fits the piece. And I just try to forget about everything else. But that isn't the only way you can be a writer. It's whatever fits you. It's whatever makes you feel good. And if you find that place that gives you that feeling, where you're doing the thing that you want to do, where you have that feeling that you got here, you can almost tap it like a well. You won't always be great. Some days you'll sit down and what you write will not be good. But you're giving yourself the chance to be good. And there are those moments, and I can remember them like spot memories, where it all works. And the music is playing, and the house is quiet, and the words are just coming. And for me, there is nothing better than that feeling. That's probably why I was a virgin until I was like 26. There is nothing better than those moments where just everything else goes away, and you're not even writing. You're like a vessel. I don't want to get too but you're like this thing, this instrument that is just pouring out the words. You only get that by doing it. I'm going to play a little video now, and this is probably a mistake because the older I've gotten, the more emotional I've gotten. I'm constantly weeping at this conference. I've always decided I have to stop crying in Romania. They're going to be very alarmed by this man who's constantly bawling his eyes out over some weird thing. And I have to tell you, it's not that one weird thing. It's like the accumulation of many weird things. But I'm going to play a video that gets me every single time, so I'm going to somehow kind of look in the air. This is a video of a writer who's passed away now, but his name is Maurice Sendak. He was a children's writer. He wrote Where the Wild Things Are. I have two people who are going, I can't tell if those are groans of pleasure or... the groan is a very hard thing to read. He is talking in this video about... He has just been asked the question... He raises the idea, why bother being born? Which is a fairly heavy question, and I know we've had some heavy moments today, but this video for me is just this perfect elucidation of life and the writer's life in particular. I'm somehow going to put myself in an isolation tank so I can't hear what's going on. But.
And I guess that goes on every day, doesn't it? And the question is why? Why bother? I don't mean why bother to die, but why bother to get born?
So if I were to pose that question to you in terms of your life, why bother being born and having lived these 80 years?
I would have no answer except that I would have missed Herman and I would have missed Lynn.
Who is Lynn in your life?
My best friend. Person who has sacrificed herself for me. Person thinks I'm worth the trouble of being cared for. She's everybody. She's everything. She's the most devoted friend I have, and I would like to think I'm her most devoted friend.
What else, in these 80 years, if you had not been born, what else would you have missed out?
I would have missed knowing my brother and sister, which would have been a terrible loss. Terrible loss. I would have missed Jenny, my dog. She appeared in Higgledy Piggledy Pop. And that's what I say, she appeared in every book I did for as long as she lived.
Why was she so important? What was she like?
Because, how do you explain that you love somebody or something? How do you say? She was my companion for like 13 years. And I can still see her from the back. And then she died on Fire Island. And I would have missed Eugene. And I did some very good books, which mostly is an isolationist form of life. Doing books, doing pictures, and is the only true happiness I've ever enjoyed in my life. It's sublime. To just go into another room and make pictures. It's magic time, where all your weaknesses of character and all blemishes of personality and whatever else torments you fades away. It just doesn't matter. You're doing the one thing you want to do, and you do it well, and you know you do it well, and you're happy. The whole promise is to do the work, sitting down at the drawing table, turning on the radio, and I think what a transcendent life this is, that I'm doing everything I want to do. In that moment, I feel like I'm a lucky man. I'm trying very hard to concentrate on what is here, what I can see, what I can smell, what I can feel, making that the important business of life. Just looking out the window, the colors that I see, reading Charles Dickens at night for an hour, little rituals I have of listening to Mozart. I'm learning how not to take myself so seriously. That what I'm working on, what I'd like to work on, it's not earth-shakingly important anymore. I am not earth-shakingly important. So what am I saying? I'm just clearing the decks for a simple death. You're done with your work. You're done with your life. And your life was your work. I think what I've offered is different, but not because I drew better than anybody or wrote better than anybody, but because I was more honest than anybody. And in the discussion of children and the lives of children and the fantasies of children and the language of children, I said anything I wanted. Because I don't believe in children. I don't believe in childhood. I don't believe that this demarcation. Well, you mustn't tell them that. Oh, you mustn't tell them that. You tell them anything you want. Just tell them if it's true. If it's true, you tell them. I have adult thoughts in my head, experiences. But I'm never going to talk about them. I'm never going to write about them. Why is my needle stuck in childhood? I don't know why. I don't know. I guess that's where my heart is.
That video is made by Spike Jones. And for me, that's just a perfect edited, it's just a perfect, beautiful little thing. It has about 2,000 views on YouTube. Katy Perry's tits have like 200 million. And those are the moments when I wonder what the fuck is wrong with people. But for me, I believe in, I don't know what you would call them, saints. I believe in having people who guide you. what I love about that video is it's like this capturing of a fearless man. He's not even scared of death. And I admire that so much. Holy shit, I promised I wouldn't do this. Quick boob joke. I asked myself how he became fearless. And I think that comes with time. You get older and you don't give a shit what anybody thinks of you. He knows he's good. He knows that he wrote good books. He knows that he's capable of beautiful things. He knows that if you're right, that no one can touch you, which I think is important. That idea that truth saves you from everything else. But I think he's mostly fearless because what he was talking about at the end of that being stuck in childhood. I think he's fearless because he never forgot who he was when he was a boy. Think back to who you were as a little kid. And how you saw the world. Your natural state as a child is admiration. Right? You look up. You love things. You believe in things. You believe in tooth fairies and Santa Claus. You still love your parents. You're in love with the boy or the girl next door. You're in love with a book, or you have a stuffed animal. You have these things that you believe in. And then something terrible happens to us. We become teenagers. Teenagers are assholes. And they're assholes to each other, especially. And when you're a teenager, this is when fear starts, because you start caring about what other people think. It's the worst thing in the world. You become embarrassed about the things you love. Someone makes fun of the songs you like. You sure as shit aren't taking your stuffed animal on trips anymore. You stop telling your parents that they love them. You're like, oh, Mom, yeah, you have these moments. You become embarrassed by your loves. And again, it's because you start to care about what people think of you. And I can tell you, as an old man now, that the poorest years of your life will be the ones when you don't believe in anything or anyone. You need those people to combat. You need the antidotes to fear. You need them to combat those people who made fun of you when you were a teenager. As you grow up, those people still exist. They grow up to be heartless and sinister, and they become critics, usually. And critics are the agents of fear. They represent fear. They are the human embodiment of fear. And again, my advice is, first of all, you fight them, by maybe not listening to them so much. But I also believe you fight them. You say a couple simple words, and I apologize in advance for my language. You say, fuck them. You say, fuck those small people right in the eyeball. They will never do what you do. They will never do what you do. Because they don't believe in anything, and they don't believe in themselves most of all. That's why they watch while you are going to do. And yeah, they might sit on the sidelines and chirp away at you and send you mean tweets. What do we say? We say, fuck them. You fuck them every time you sit in the chair and say the thing that you want to say. You put on your headphones, you're sitting by yourself in the dark, and you don't hear them anymore. And this is about more than the writer's life. This is, not to get too, I don't want to make it out like I've discovered the secret of life, although I will tell you I've discovered the secret of life. I can wish for you all sorts of things. That you get the job that you want, that you meet the man or the woman of your dreams, or the men and the women of your dreams, depending on your polyamorous, that you grow up to be rich and healthy and happy, or I can wish for you the one thing that takes care of everything else, that one day you will not be afraid, You sit in your chair and you earn your fearlessness, and you don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Thank you.